Well, hello again, everyone, and welcome to our latest webcast that we're bringing you from Travel Weekly as part of our Roadmap to Recovery series. And I'm joined today by Steve Heapy, who is, of course, the CEO of Jet2 Holidays, by Paul Charles, who is an industry commentator, but also the CEO and owner of the PC agency, and Paul Cleary, who is the CEO and owner of Caribtours. So welcome, gentlemen. Thank you for joining me.
Morning.
This is being recorded Monday morning, so we've had a weekend to digest Friday's news, but that's what I wanted to talk about today. The release of the green list, the long-awaited green list. I'm going to come to you first, Paul, if I may, because it's fair to say it was shorter than you were predicting.
Yes, and shorter than many were predicting. Many of us who watch these things closely were predicting about 20 destinations to be added. So I have to say we're all really surprised that it was only 12, bearing in mind there are so many destinations around the world who've worked so hard to meet the government's criteria and do meet it. So it's even more extraordinary that they were not included on the dirty dozen, if you like, the list of 12. Obviously, there's some great destinations on there, like Portugal, Israel, Gibraltar, but you've got to question why the government has added places like Tristan da Cunha and Ascension when they haven't added other British overseas territories like Turks and Caicos, which equally meet the criteria. And it just adds fuel to the fire that this is a very political move. It's obviously welcome that the government have started travel from May the 17th. That's what we were all calling for. So it's great to see overseas travel start according to Boris's roadmap that he set out on February the 22nd. But it's underwhelming. It's too few countries when there are many that do meet the green list. And it's a bit of an insult, frankly, to some of those destinations to see a country like Brunei on there, which I can assure you does not meet the government's criteria.
Okay, all right, let's come back to that in a minute. Let's come to you, Steve, because one might think you would be disappointed with it, but of course you'd already put your program, the restart, back to June the 24th. So were you kind of in some way not really expecting that much from this announcement?
No, we didn't think we'd get too much from the government, to be honest. I mean, the list is disappointing. I agree with Paul. The number of destinations is very small. I think the criteria hasn't been applied uniformly across all destinations. Two of the destinations you can't get to anyway, Australia and New Zealand. I don't think we're going to be spending much time on twin centres to the South Sandwich Islands and Tristan da Cunha, to be honest. I don't think there's going to be much demand for that.
Could be a new route for you, Steve.
Absolutely. We're busy planning at the moment. The demand will be tsunami-like, I'm sure. But I think I'm very disappointed with it, to be honest. I understand that the government have been very cautious, that's fine, but I don't think the criteria has been applied, as I said, uniformly. We're still waiting for some clarity on whether islands will be done separately or together, and they should be done separately. The government, I think, have committed to that, but we've heard over the weekend it might be a resource issue. Now, if that's the case, that's not acceptable. So, yeah, pretty disappointed. There's only really one destination that we do, Faro. We've seen a decent uptick in bookings, to be honest, but I think it didn't help having the guy from Border Force on the announcement after I mean, basically they said, okay, you can go to some places, but it's going to be an absolute nightmare. I mean, if that's giving one hand and taking away with the other, I was stunned. If that was a private company that did that, basically saying this year is going to be a nightmare, service level is going to be really bad, and everyone's going to be massively let down as to what they expect, you would have MPs from all persuasions demanding heads on spikes, compensation, people being sacked from the job. But you just had this guy saying, sorry guys, it's going to be a nightmare, live with it. And I think it's absolutely disgraceful that, you know, he is a public servant, as are his department. We are paying for that, a public servant. And I think they need to remember that's what their job is. And just to stand up and say it's going to be crap, I don't think it's good enough at all.
All right. Okay. I really want to come on and talk about the whole Border Force issue.
Okay.
Thank you, Steve. Let's just bring Paul in. Paul, what was your reaction? You must have been hoping for some of the destinations that are big for you to be on that list, and obviously lacking?
Yeah, Paul said underwhelming. That's exactly it. Paul, if you want to hear what my last few weeks have been about, we've seen growing business, demand coming in every day, having a really good feeling about my core business is primarily the Caribbean. So British overseas territories are our stock in trade. And the demand has been coming in so great. I've been feeling very good about it until I woke up on Friday morning and saw you on GMTV. And I had paused. I thought today isn't going to be as good as I felt if Paul Charles has an inside track on this. So yeah, really underwhelmed, really disappointed. Really disappointed because I think it's a missed opportunity. I think the government it's so disingenuous, Lucy. They've stuck to their promise of 17th of May, restart, but really they've just thrown in 12 destinations. I honestly think of those 12 destinations, maybe 8 of them are made up just to make up the list. I really do. So we're really pleased about Portugal. We're also really pleased, and we'll come on to it, we're really pleased that travel isn't illegal anymore. I mean, for the amber list, I know this is about the green list, but we've got a lot of amber departures still due to go. So that is positive. So we have digested it over the weekend, but underwhelmed, bitterly disappointed. But as we've digested it over the weekend, we're ready to go again.
Yeah. Well, Paul, you've talked about how you think, I think you've tipped Grenada, Barbados, Antigua and St. Lucia. I'm talking to Paul Charles now in the comment that you've written for us this morning. So you do think they will come on fairly quickly. So, and as we say, it is promising that we are now at least moving and it's not illegal and we're not going to be fined £5,000 to travel. So I guess that is one positive. But what's your view then on those Caribbean islands to give Paul Cleary a bit of hope?
Yes, from May the 17th, the declaration to travel form disappears. So you can travel without needing any reason at last after several months. So that's good news. And it also means there'll be many people, I think, who can and will travel to amber countries, despite the government saying they don't really want you to travel for leisure reasons. It's only an advisory. It's not illegal. So I think there are enough people who will travel to amber zones and are quite happy to self-isolate when they get back. More importantly, there are some loopholes which enable you to do that. There's nothing to stop you flying to Portugal if you own a second home, for example, and then driving across to France, Spain, or Italy in a hire car and actually staying there until those countries go green, probably at the end of June. So there are all sorts of loopholes that can enable people to travel. I'm confident about...
Paul, just before we move on from that though, but is that, I'm being devil's advocate, but is that responsible? If you're a travel agent watching this, would that be a responsible thing to be advising people to do?
Well, I'm not saying that if you're a second homeowner, you're going to book a whole package and go through a travel agent and involve a third party. It may be something, and I think it will be something that second homeowners choose to do in order to go and see the home they haven't seen for some months. So it is an option. But I think in terms of opening up, yes, end of June, certainly we're going to see, and judging by the data, this is what it's saying. Yeah. We're seeing the same data as the government's seeing. It's saying end of June that we will see those European countries, mainland countries open up. We will certainly see the Caribbean islands open up, which have tiny numbers of infections, very strong growing vaccination rates. Grenada, which we represent, I'll be very honest about it, it's got 70% of its hotel staff have been vaccinated. So that's more than here in the UK. So very, very strong rates in most of those Caribbean islands, which enable them to open up. So I think you're going to see a different picture. And the problem is, and I feel for Steve and for other airlines, and obviously I've worked in Virgin Atlantic, it's a torrid time because 7 weeks is still a ridiculously long time to wait for vital revenues to be coming in. And that's why it's so difficult at the moment, because the government may think it's not too long, but it's a long time in a season. It's a long time in a quarter when you want to grow your summer season. And that's why I do hope, and I think there will be some islands coming on stream from early June, especially in Greece.
Okay, all right. Are you confident in that, Steve? Obviously, we've got these 3-week reviews that we're going to be waiting for now. It's just being at that kind of mercy, isn't it? Like every 3 weeks, you're going to have to wait to see what's added. What are your thoughts sort of for what Paul's saying about the end of June?
Well, the next 3-week period is obviously due at the end of May. and they give typically 5 to 7 days notice. So realistically, the earliest we'll get anything is end of the first week in June to fly to. I would hope some of the islands are included. If you look at some of the data for the islands, some of the Greek islands, the Canaries, the Balearics, they are in pretty good shape, not a million miles away from where the Algarve is. So I would hope those would come on. The only thing is we don't really know the detail as to how the government decide what is red, amber or green. We understand there's 4 criteria they look at. That's the infection rate, the vaccination rate, the prevalence of variants of concern, and access to sufficient medical facilities, including the ability to do genomic sequencing. But we don't know where each of those 4 things have been set. So it's very difficult to predict what will be red, amber or green. So we need islands to be done separately, and it would be very helpful to understand what the government's criteria is. I understand their reluctance for not wanting to give that, because people are going to be second guessing it day in, day out, which is going to make things even more confusing, but it would be very handy. And if I may, the other thing I don't like about the list is the green watch list. I mean, putting something on a green watch list is as bad as putting it on amber. People aren't going to book for something on a green watch list, but again, it's negatively skewed. That's like getting an A minus. It's not on the green list, and it's probably going towards amber, but there's no ambers that are going towards green. So it's all negatively skewed.
Their argument, Steve, is that would then give you enough warning that it might be going amber. I mean, I'm just sort of saying what they're so, but you think that's actually very a deterrent still for a consumer.
It is, yeah. I mean, if some people will travel if it's green and they won't travel if it's amber, if it's on green watch list, I'm sure they'll think twice about it. But it would be good to have a green watch list, i.e. things that are going from amber potentially up to green, because I think we've said a million times, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to understand this, that, running an airline, it's not like getting in a car after you've been on holiday and turning the key and driving off. Cranking up an airline to full operational capability is quite a big job. And we've got to employ colleagues overseas. We've got to make sure the ground handlers are done, make sure air traffic control sorted. There's a million things we have to do. And that's why as much notice is very important.
Yeah. And just before we move on, Steve, Paul, both the Pauls were saying that some people would still travel if it was amber, but for your customer base, does amber really put them off, really, because they can't necessarily, afford to self-isolate when they're coming home?
Well, some people will still travel with amber and some people won't. I mean, it's easy for us to say some people will still travel because we're all working from home and doing Zoom calls, but people that work in hospitality, supermarkets, NHS, they can't afford to have a week off, or they'll have a week off and it'll be unpaid. So I think it's very much depending on circumstances. But as the UK domestic economy is starting to crank up, I think there will be less and less people that can afford to take 5-8 days off work to quarantine. They just can't do it.
Yeah, all right. And Paul Cleary, coming back to you, you were nodding there when you said some people would go to amber destinations, but do you think that, I know you were doing really good bookings for future, weren't you? You're certainly for 22 onwards. So are you sort of now thinking that's really where your focus is? Are you still holding on hope for this summer, or where are you?
Yeah, I'll tell you where we are. And it's fundamentally different, Steve, and we're a small boutique company that can turn on the sixpence, so we don't have to crank up an airline. We can be that nimble in terms of what we sell. Our clients, I think we've been selling, we've done a lot of late business that will be travel between the end of May. Our first departures are to Greece, 23rd of May, and then we've got a fairly busy time through to the end of August at the moment. I think 50-60% of those will still travel. We know that, because these are conversations we've been having with these clients as well. I think 50-60% of those will travel. Yeah, but next year is looking incredibly strong, and this year is looking uncertain. And I think from a travel agent perspective, Lucy, I think it's really important. The confusion, the government hasn't, I'm sure they're trying their best, but they've made this situation even more confusing it's even more difficult to interpret what you can and what you can't do. And I think the key messaging for us is, Amber, for a lot of clients, Steve is absolutely right. It will not be an option to take a further 5 days off work. I get it. For a lot of my clients, it will be an option. And that extra testing, for a lot of them are telling me they will go to that extra expense. But, you know, the key message for us is, Amber's all I've got to play with at the moment. And it's very important that I get across the message that you can travel. You can travel. If you're in a position to, you can travel in Amber. Kids is going to be difficult because of school, but there's a lot of people who travel without kids. And we've already missed May half term already in terms of that opportunity. The next big opportunity is going to be summer holidays, which is probably going to be quite a different story. But for this period between the 17th of May and the end of July, yeah, you can travel. So I don't know what to expect of this summer. I think I've learned to keep my expectations very low, Lucy, and wait to be pleasantly surprised.
Okay, all right, fair enough. Well, let's pick up on Steve's point then about resourcing. I mean, to sort of make sure that they can do islands separate from mainland countries, but the big one around this border force issue, because I think he actually said it would be 14 to 15 times longer to get through coming back into this country. I mean, I don't know how they've done that calculation, but that seems an awful lot longer. It's not just like twice as long. I mean, that's going to add hours, isn't it, onto people coming back into the country, which is, as Steve says, going to give a really, really bad experience if you're coming in, got kids late at night, whatever. So, Paul, what's, you know, why is that the case? Why have they not sort of ramped up for this? They've had a lot of time, haven't they, to prepare for it?
Well, I'm afraid the Home Office have not really done themselves any favours during this whole pandemic in the way they've treated the travel sector. And I'm afraid the Home Secretary is not exactly a fan of people travelling. So therefore, the resourcing has not been forthcoming in most cases. And Steve's absolutely right. I mean, to be fair to Border Force, I came through Gatwick last week, having come back from Mexico, and it was seamless. I got through in 60 seconds. But there are not many flights going into Gatwick. It's a different story, of course, at Heathrow, and they are manually checking. And there is no excuse, bearing in mind the government have been planning this roadmap since February the 22nd and earlier than that, because they knew what they were going to say. There is no excuse for not enabling the e-gates to come back into action at our airports. There's no excuse for moving away from manual processing to automatic processing, because they knew that more people would be traveling from May the 17th onwards under their own roadmap. So for them to turn around and say it might be the autumn before they fix this problem is unacceptable. It's bad planning. There are so many resources in government. They don't know what to do with half of them. There are so many people working on travel across the Department for Transport, Department of Health, the Home Office, Downing Street. It's unacceptable for them to turn around and say they don't have enough resources. And this is the problem. They want long queues because it will put people off traveling. So it's an area, I'm afraid, that they're going to have to sort out urgently. I suspect in all the lobbying that all of us are doing in the sector, we're going to have to bring this up urgently with both Home Office and with Department for Transport and make them come up with the answers, because it simply won't be acceptable.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. I was going to ask you, Steve, because I know it's something that, you know, is now a real focus for you. But I mean, I know the green list is one thing, but presumably you're already starting your lobbying on this issue.
Yeah, we are. I mean, the Department for Transport are taking steps in the right direction. Whether we agree or disagree with the initial list is another matter, but they have sort of kept to the word and given a small number of destinations. We've given our comments on that already, but I agree with Paul. I think Border Force, it's unacceptable. If this was one of our companies treating customers like this, there would be uproar. There would be debates in the Houses of Parliament, demands for resignations, etc. And to just say, sorry guys, it's going to be massive delays isn't acceptable. I mean, you've seen how Heathrow is. Sorry.
If they can't get the technology, you know, if they can't, I know they're talking about the passenger locator forms being digitalised, but then only at a handful of airports, and not the ones that you fly from, Steve, particularly. But if they can't do it, if they can't get that up to speed, is it then just a case of manpower and just making sure the manual process is expedited by putting more people in place?
Yeah, I think it has. I mean, the Home Office, Border Force, has had the luxury, not being a private company, of not having to furlough people, not having to give people wage cuts, not losing people because they've got a wage cut and they can go get a job somewhere that's higher paid. They're fully staffed and fully paid, and they should be able to move resource around and handle the queues. I mean, you've seen what's happened at Heathrow. There's been long queues there, and these are, let's say, business people, perhaps slightly more wealthy people. They might have paid for quicker tests, etc. They've got all the documentation done for them by PAs, etc., returning from business trips. Wait till families land in the UK at 1 o'clock in the morning with tired kids saying, "Daddy, I want a drink." "Oh, sorry, you can't have one. You're in a lifeless immigration hall with no vending machines to buy even a bottle of water. Don't worry, son, it's only another 9 hours to go." I mean, there'll be uproar, absolute uproar.
And I mean, but you're not going to not sell, holidays because of that, are you? So I mean,
Well, no, that's giving up. What we have to do is try and work with the government and the Home Office to get this fixed. I mean, they've said what their intention is. They've set the service level, which is, I mean, it's not setting a low bar. It's pretty much burying the bar underneath the ground. It's that low. And we've got to work with with Border Force and the government to try and get this sorted, because it's not acceptable.
Lucy, I think when, as Steve says, thousands and thousands of families and wider mass market consumers are traveling and being held up for hours and hours at our airports, and the pictures start emerging and the videos start emerging, people will start blaming the Home Office and Priti Patel, and that's when she'll be under pressure, if she hasn't already been moved in a government reshuffle this summer. So, I think that's when they will take action, when she's under extreme pressure. It won't last. We can't survive till autumn in this situation. They're going to have to make changes.
All right, I'm just conscious of time. I just want to move on to testing, because obviously there's many people that basically feel that the NHS lateral flow test, there's no reason why that couldn't be used pre-departure from the destination back into the UK. I mean, is that something that would, obviously, clearly it would help, wouldn't it? Is that something you would endorse, Paul?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Sorry, Paul Cleary will answer, and then Paul Chant.
You go first, Paul.
Both Pauls. You can both have a go at testing.
I would endorse, absolutely. If it's in use already and it's good enough already, then I don't see why it can't be used for travellers. I mean, I find all of this very, very quickly, and I know time is of the essence. All of this is so political, Lucy. They're just trying to slam the brakes on travel for as long as possible. That announcement back to the Border Force chap on Friday, he turns up. He had no place at that press conference at all. He turns up dressed like Ted Hastings from Line of Duty, and he gives us miserable information to put us off travel. All of this is about a narrative to delay travel. It's all about a narrative to delay travel. So back to lateral flow, yeah, I think we should absolutely be trying it. Most of my clients will be double vaccinated by the end of this month, Lucy. Most of my clients will be double vaccinated by the end of this month. So, and our kids are all going to school, taking these tests twice a week, and it's good enough for their schools. And this is what I think. You don't have to be informed about the travel industry to not understand why it's good enough for our schools and it's good enough for our kids, but it isn't good enough for travel.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's 16 million people have been fully jabbed now in this country. That covers all of the most vulnerable. So the risk is much, much lower. We are way behind as a country on where other countries are. So the Americans are letting their citizens travel, and they are traveling in their droves to places close to the US, like Caribbean, like Mexico. Albeit there is a government red list in the US, but you can ignore it. You can still travel. You've got Italy opening up middle of May. You've got Portugal opening up. You've got France saying it's going to open up. Spain saying it's going to open up. And here in the UK, we're still not opening up travel as strongly as we should be. And these lateral flow tests are the source of much government argument. Even this morning, they're arguing over whether, in fact, they will be able to supply these lateral flow tests, whether you will be able to take them, the NHS test, when you're in a green country as your pre-departure test. At the moment, the health hawks are saying they don't want you to take them. And it's looking more unlikely, even though the Transport Secretary did suggest you could bring your own bottle, as he put it. He said you could effectively bring your own NHS lateral flow test with you in a suitcase, pack them to the rafters in your suitcase, take them whilst you're abroad, and that would be good enough from a green country. They seem to be rowing back on that. And as Paul says, they're good enough to open schools, therefore they should be good enough to open overseas travel. Let me just give you quickly one further loophole that is legal. You can take, if you're going on a weekend break to Lisbon or Faro on a Friday, you can take your NHS lateral flow test here, log the result as a negative, hopefully, into the NHS system, go to Faro, have a fantastic weekend, fly back Sunday night. You don't need to take another test when you've your pre-departure test, because you're within the 72 hours.
Cool. 72 hours, yeah.
So it sums it up that it's good enough.
Yeah, okay. But of course, tour operators everywhere and agents, they're trying to get PCR tests at really good rates. And obviously your rival TUI has got them down to 20 quid, Steve. I mean, are you going to go down that route and try and get a deal on PCR tests, or are you going to hold out hope for lateral flow being allowed?
Well, we're working on both at the moment. We are speaking to a number of companies to try and get the cost down for PCR tests, and we have got the cost down. What we are doing, though, is making sure that the companies we can get, it's dead easy to get a cheap price. You just say, we'll guarantee you loads of volume, and they give you a cheap price, and it looks great. But what we're doing is spending a lot of time studying and agreeing service levels with these companies. It's fine getting a test for 20 quid, but if you don't get it back in time, you're knackered, aren't you? You can't go on holiday. So I think after we got it at 20 quid, they say they have. I don't know what the service level's like, what guarantees are given as to whether the test will be returned on time. That's something we're spending a lot of time and effort on. If we sign a deal with a company, we expect the test results back 100% of the time as per the agreed schedule. Because the worst thing you can do is get people's hopes up. After the last 15 months we've had, they have a test ready to go away, and then they don't get the results back in time, and you've got to tell your two little children that they're not going on holiday because this cheap deal that you got wasn't as good as it first looked. So that's our big focus. It's dead easy to get the price down. It's the service levels that's the hard thing to get agreement on.
Okay, so that's something you're working on at the moment. But
Absolutely.
You said you're doing both, so you're also pushing the government as well on the lateral flow being made, being.
Yeah, I mean, to Paul's point, they're either good enough or they're not. It's not like, the results are valid if you're a school child, but not if you're a holiday maker. It's just ridiculous. It's either works or it doesn't. So I don't see what the differentiation is.
We have testing days in this house, so if they're not good enough, that would be quite annoying, because we've been doing that for weeks now to get the kids back to school. All right, I just want to talk about destinations themselves. Obviously, Paul Charles, you represent many. Paul and Steve will be in constant conversations with the destinations that you go to. And Paul at the start said it's actually very insulting that some haven't got on the list. Some will have got themselves ready, they'll have been waiting for that list. Paul Cleary, the destinations that you go to, I mean, they're desperate for business, aren't they, from the UK? This must have been, I want to get an idea of what it's like in destination.
Yeah, no, thank you, Lucy. They are desperate for business, and they've been doing the right thing all along, not for the UK government's sake, by the way, for their own population's sake. The Caribbean, for example, they have been managing this crisis incredibly well. They closed their borders on the 17th of March, many of them, 2020. That's how quick they were to react. They've managed their infection rates. They're managing the vaccination rollout. They prioritise hotel staff and tourism staff and taxi drivers as frontline workers. They're managing it incredibly well. And I imagine that all the ones I'm speaking to, they all feel that they've done everything that has been asked of them and more. Yet, they're still not on the list. I would imagine Friday was met with great disappointment, but we all know that they all know what they've got to do. They've got to be on the next list. That's all. There's no point them complain, or any of us, of course, complaining about this. It's bitterly disappointing, but they will all make damn sure that they're on the next list when it's published.
Okay, and Steve, what about some of your destinations? I mean, Turkey, not great news for Turkey. Cyprus, what's the feeling overseas in some of the big destinations you go to?
Well, there's still time for us yet, because we're not due to start up till the 24th of June, and there's another 2 review periods before then. So I think, as Paul said, overseas governments are going to be working very hard with the British government to try and give them some confidence that they're ready to receive people. I mean, if the government have set criteria, they're going to have to meet that criteria, but they've got, in respect of our start of operations date, they've got 6 weeks to get their 2 review periods. So I'm not giving up on any of the destinations yet. I think there's a very good chance that we'll get some islands in the next review period, and then hopefully the bulk of the majority of destinations by the end of June.
Okay. All right, and then let's just finish with talking about demand. Steve, you did say you saw a decent uplift over the weekend for Faro. I'm just interested to know what, obviously this is our reaction as industry people, but what do you think the green list, I saw so much on social media, people going, oh, and I'll go to the Sandwich Islands then. And it was all sort of very, people seemed a bit annoyed. I had some friends of mine who have got holidays booked going, what should I do? It's still not on the green list. So what's the consumer reaction been like, Steve?
Portugal's had a big boost in bookings, but most of the other destinations have seen an increase as well. It tends to be the case that when you get good news, the destinations that the good news relates to gets a big boost, but other destinations ride on the coattails a bit, because I think what Friday did was show that hopefully we're at the beginning of the end, and that confidence is returning. So all destinations have seen an improvement since Friday, but obviously for the ones that are open, it's much better. I mean, our bookings to the South Sandwich Islands have gone through the roof. It's just phenomenal. So everywhere's received a boost, and we hope that that confidence will continue, particularly if at the next review period more destinations are added in.
Yeah, and same question to you, Paul Cleary. What did you see over the weekend in terms of your customers?
Yeah, exactly the same, because we have a short haul program as well. We had a great day for Portugal, but it was incredibly frustrating because we couldn't get availability. It was almost immediate, the impact. And what the government has done, I mean, the government should be getting a kickback from the Portugal Tourist Board, because the amount of peak demand that they've seen as a result of this. But we still had a busy weekend with new business. People do understand that it is the beginning of the end. That's well put, Steve. 17th of May, travel is no longer illegal. These lists are complicated to understand, but people now know that they will have a summer holiday this year. And yeah, most of our clients will be looking for August and July. And we expect this to be a busy week, but it will also have a lot of confusion for those clients who are on amber, who aren't quite sure what they want to do.
Okay. And the other thing that kind of exploded or lit up social media was some of Shaps's terminology in the briefing, describing, travel agents in the past, and then going on about vouchers again rather than refund credit notes. It really, touches a nerve with the industry, because I think they feel he still, after all this time, doesn't really quite understand how our industry works. I mean, would you agree with that, Paul, or does he actually really understand it, which is why they're really putting the brakes on it for us?
Well, I think most government ministers would say they do understand their sector. They take lots of briefings, they hear lobbyists, but the nuances are still not there in government. I think there's still a lack of understanding generally about how travel interconnects globally, how it works. But the thing is, we're underway. We've got to be positive about that. And crucially, I hope the airlines and tourism boards, and we represent lots, realize that this summer actually could be very exciting. They've got to be innovative. They've got to look at how they're going to extend the seasons. Can we get a longer season? So if June is not going to deliver the revenues, can we really excite consumers to be booking actually for October, November much more? How are they going to be incentivized to book for those periods that traditionally are very quiet or when the season ends? So I hope that the industry realizes this actually could be an exciting moment to get further revenues in, more ancillary revenue with new products, really create something that excites consumers, gets them back into traveling in the way they were pre-pandemic. And it's going to take some time, I know, but I hope that we have a really long season this year to make up for the slow start to the summer.
Steve's nodding. You're going to extend your season surely, Steve, aren't you, into October?
Yeah, we've done that with some destinations already, and we, as you know, we're normally the quickest to replan when something happens, and we've got various scenarios ready to dust off as and when. But yeah, some we've extended already, and others we will do. And I think the confidence will continue to build through the summer, and we could be in for a very, very strong end to the summer.
Brilliant. All right. Well, look, that's a nice upbeat note to leave it on. But thank you for your comments. Really, really interesting. I'm really grateful for your time. So thank you to Steve from Jet2 Holidays, to Paul from the PC Agency, and to Paul from Caribtours. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you for having us.